lunge and twist, so the 7 primal movements. Main reason we're talking about this today is because we do work with a tactical population. So a lot of our members will be in austere or remote environments, meaning they will be on base in another country or in this country, on ship, forward operating base, might be at a cottage, on leave, wherever you may be. We want you to have a nice base knowledge of what you can do in those environments. So for each one of these today, we will just be talking about the movements. We will not be demoing them. If you do want any of these movements demoed, please leave a comment below, and we will definitely make another video to demo each one of those so you guys have a visual representation of everything that we're going to talk about today. So, without further ado, we are going to split up a couple of these. So we're going to start off with our push-pull so we can talk about the vertical and horizontal aspect of these movements. So the first one we got here is our push. So we got both vertical and horizontal. So horizontal going here, aka something similar to a bench press, or vertical going up over the head. So today we will be talking about this in regards to the orientation of the shoulder. So horizontal going forward and vertical going up and away from the body. So first one we're going to talk about is our vertical push. So vertical push, straight up overhead. Any vertical push, I want you to think bicep by your ear, and I want you to think to brace your core so you're not overarching your back. You want to keep that nice and stable. So the first one we're going to talk about today is our overhead press or a push press. So, essentially using a barbell, dumbbells, anything like that, you're just going to start here, press up overhead, and back down. There's several different variations of this, but we're just going to talk about the normal overhead press with a barbell or dumbbells, for example. So starting out at your chin, pressing straight up overhead. Big thing, like I said at the beginning, think biceps by your ears. You want to try to pretend that you're bending that bar in half, get that external rotation at the shoulders, and then brace your core. That way you're not going to overextend through the back. That way it's going to save your low back, and you're going to get a lot more out of the exercise, considering you're going to have a lot more core activation, so it's going to work towards that six-pack that we all want. Next one, switching up, we're going to go to dips. So notice a lot of these are primarily chest and shoulders. So dips, both with a dip bar that attaches to a rig, or a dip machine on an assisted pull-up or anything like that, or simply tricep dips on your bench or on a couch or something like that. Get that tricep. Big thing here, keep those elbows nice and close as you're pushing up. You can adjust your hand width depending on how far you feel comfortable, but it's the same premise for each one. Thirdly, one of my personal favorite presses, we're going to talk about the Z press. So, Z press, you will be sitting on the floor, legs spread out. A lot of core activation to keep yourself braced, and then you're going to press overhead. Okay? So it's a little bit trickier because you don't have the use of your legs. Think seated overhead press, but with a lot more core stability. You got to bring your legs out wide to keep yourself balanced. This is one that I would probably make another video to demo and explain just for the sake of today, time, and also the environment. We'll have to switch up because we have things on our gym floor today. We will be covering it through here. So, Z press, big function here is core stability through that movement rather. So, any of these can be programmed throughout. These are the ones you can alternate through your push-pull days. Just have some sort of variation of these. Obviously, there is more, but these would be a good baseline for you. With each one of these, if you are using anything except for the dip rather, so the overhead press or the Z press, you can do an inverted kettlebell press as well. So essentially what that means is you have the handle of the kettlebell here with the bell of the kettlebell here, and you can press. Really good for shoulder stability, and it's going to add an extra challenge throughout that movement. Okay? So, moving on. Horizontal presses, okay? Or horizontal pushes. First one, we're in the military, you know what it is, push-ups. So, push-ups, just your standard push-ups, preferably a strict push-up, but you can change your hand width to add a little bit of difficulty, but overall, hand position doesn't really change a whole lot, it's still the same musculature. Next one, bench press. Same idea, this time on your back, You can do a kettlebell, you can do barbell, you can do dumbbell, you can use a sandbag, because most people in this field will have a sandbag at their disposal. If not, a backpack, a rucksack, pillowcase full of dirt, something. Okay? Before we talk about this, we're going to add the floor press, because it's very similar. So floor press. That one, instead of using a bench, you're just going to lie flat on your back on the floor and set the rack a lot lower, so you're only coming down until your elbows hit the floor. Big thing for these two movements, and even the push-up, for example, actually any of these movements for reference, you want to think external rotation at the shoulders, so that if you hold your hands out forward and you twist so your hands are out, you're going to feel all of this musculature on the back of your shoulder activate, and that's what we want. We want you to pretend you're bending the bar in half to get that activation. That's going to give you a much greater rate of success. It's going to add a nice shelf for you to press off of, and it's going to add a little bit more weight to the bar if you do it properly over time. So with these and a lot of the movements we will talk about, changing it up through loading, so dumbbell, kettlebell, barbell, your rucksack, body weight, whatever you want to do will help change that. You can slow it down, you can pause reps, you can do tempo work, anything like that will help you switch up some of these movements. Okay? So, going on to our pull. So this is the one that's going to primarily use our lats. You will get a little bit of a bicep in here. So any pulling motion, horizontal here, so think of the opposite of our press here. Pull in will be our horizontal row, and anything overhead and down will be our vertical pull. Okay? So, start off with our vertical pulls. You know what's coming. Pull-ups, chin-ups. Any variation throughout, you can do assisted pull-ups. You can do kipping pull-ups, but if you're for testing purposes, you're going to go straight, okay? If you can do more straight pull-ups, it's going to be more beneficial over time, okay? So for that, you're just going to need a pull-up bar. You can use a tree. You can use whatever you got as long as it's stable enough to pull. You can use the top part of a wall. You may scrape your chest a little bit on the front of that wall, but hey, you do you. Next one we can do is something very similar, but with a machine. We're going to go lat pull down. But this can be a variation, okay? So what you can do with the band is you can hook it to a high surface and you can pull the band down instead if you don't have access to that. You can hook it to the top of the door frame. If you do that, just make sure it doesn't slip, because it's a very easy way to take a rubber band to the face, and nobody wants to feel that. It doesn't feel good. It's not a great situation. So with that same thing, you can change your hand grip. So with the lat pull down or pull up, you do neutral grip, pronated, or supinated for your chin up. A little bit more bicep activation in some of those movements. Hand width will also target different assistance muscles as you go through. Next one we are going to talk about is a high pull. So getting a little bit of shoulders. So this one you can use pretty much anything, a kettlebell, a barbell, a dumbbell, backpack, anything like that. You're just going to start here, you're going to pull it up high, you're going to get that shoulders activated, but you always want those hands lower than the elbows, okay? So you want this nice taper, that nice V shape while you're doing that exercise. Takes a little bit of pressure off. If you find you get a pinching sensation as you go up, you're just going to stop a little bit lower so we don't get that pinching. You may have a little bit of impingement in your shoulder that we need to work on before we can add that movement into your regular routine. Okay, so those are the big three. Obviously, there's more different variations. You can do even a dumbbell pullover. So back on the bench, pulling over, same activation. Okay, so horizontal pulls. Big one here is your bent over row. If you've spent any time in the gym, you've definitely done this before. Numerous different variations. Most popular is the barbell row. So just here, hinge back, you're going to pull up so those elbows are nice and close. Any of these pulling exercises, I want you to think of crushing an orange in your armpit. That'll give you a little tactile cue of squeezing there. If you want to activate it a little bit more, do a single arm row, and you can actually feel that lat activate as you go through. So with that, different loading, kettlebell, barbell, dumbbell, same as the other ones. Choose your poison. Next one, inverted row. So it's exactly what it sounds like. You're going to set up a barbell in the rack. You can put your feet up on a box or you can leave them on the floor, and you're going to be facing the bar. So the bar is going to be above you, and you're going to pull yourself towards that bar. If you've ever done a TRX row, very similar. Think of bringing your feet to the wall during a TRX row and rowing from there. That is an inverted row. Okay? A little bit more difficult depending on your shoulder anatomy, but it is a nice little pull for body weight. If you can't do pull-ups, most people can do an inverted row instead. Next one, cable row. So this one is with a machine. Any cable machine will do. You can do it banded as well. So you can do it seated, you can do it kneeling, however, but the cable will be right in front of you. You're going to pull it, bring those elbows right to your side. You want 90 degree in that elbow, squeeze on the back, and then release. I like to go a little bit further ahead with the shoulder blades. We have that range of motion. We should use it. So go a little bit further to your end range, and then pull back, but not enough that you're risking your thoracic spine throughout that movement. Okay? Another one you do in relation to this is a chest supported row. So you can bring your bench up, your adjustable bench, set it to about 35 degrees. You can rest your chest on it and then row up from there. It takes a little bit of pressure off the legs, the hips, the low back, and you can pull from there. Same idea with that one. Most likely going with dumbbells or kettlebells. You can pick up rocks, whatever you got. It's a little bit harder to do with the barbell because the bench itself will actually be in the way. Okay? So those are our vertical, horizontal pulls. We're going through this fast and furious. Like I said, we'll demo them at a later date. Now the big one here, my personal favorite, the squat. So with the squat, we are going to talk about your standard squats. We're going to talk about modifiers, and we're going to talk about loading. Okay? So with the squat, big one here, back squat, front squat, overhead squat. Okay? Anything with a barbell. So back, front, and overhead. Okay? Big thing here is you want to make sure those heels stay on the floor. You want to think of your feet as a tripod. So that big knuckle of your big toe, you want that pinky toe and your heel on the floor, and you want to keep that arch set. So you want to pull that big toe back towards your heel, feel that arch activate, and you want to keep that the whole time. Okay? So with that, you can do barbell, dumbbell, kettlebell, whichever one you prefer. So obviously back squat, bar is on your back, resting on your traps. You can do low bar too, but that's a whole different story. You can do front squats, you can either hold it here or across. Overhead is the most challenging one of those, so it depends on if you have adequate shoulder mobility to actually get into that proper range of motion and into that position. Same thing with the front rack. If you can't actually get into that front rack, you're most likely going to have to go here. Or you can use a safety bar and actually hold it where it rests on your shoulders if one is available. You can use a backpack. You can wear your backpack forward if you want a little bit more core, similar to a front squat, or you can wear it on your back. Okay? Similar to a back squat. So the next one of my personal favorites for warm-ups and just as a general squat, is the Goblet Squat. You've most likely done one of these with a dumbbell or a kettlebell. You can use a plate as well, but essentially holding it in this position nice and close to your chest. Kind of got this inverted V in your arms, holding it here, and then squatting, okay? You can use the plate as a warm-up, so you'll go down with your squat, press away, and then come back up. Holding this at the bottom is really good for your ankle mobility in the warm-up, so especially with a plate, sink down to the very bottom, press that plate away. You can shift your weight ankle to ankle, and then increase that ankle range of motion, or at least warm it up. Because if we don't have adequate ankle range of motion, we're going to run into some problems. So we're going to run into butt wing, we're going to run into some shift in the knee. Because if your ankles are messed up, that's going to radiate to the knee, that's going to go to the hip, and has a chance of going into your lower back. So it's something that we want to avoid, so we really want to take care of our ankles, especially in a squatting pattern. So the next one we got is Zercher Squats. Hope I spelled that right. So Zercher Squats are a little bit different. They're a little bit more specialized in a way. So instead of holding a barbell up high, you're actually going to hold it in the pits of your elbows, and you're going to cross your arms and you're hold here and then squat. It adds a little bit of forward momentum because your arms can swing a little bit, but it's another good rendition just to switch things up for you, okay? So there's different loading patterns. We got a front, or two fronts with the goblet and with the Zercher front squat, as well as on the back. So modifiers for this, that could be anything. So we'll go mods. Big one here, pause reps or tempos. So pause reps, go down to that end position, keep tension on the musculature. You don't want to go all the way to the bottom and release all that tension. You just kind of sit there, because then you're going to have to re-brace to get back up. Okay? So you just go down to the bottom. So hopefully I stay in range here. Come down, pause, 1, 2, 3, up, and repeat. So it's nice and controlled down. Pause for a period of time at the bottom, typically like 2-3 seconds, and then explode up. Okay? Tempo squats, on the other hand, are going to be a little bit different. So, for example, if you're doing tempo with a bench press, just pretend that I'm on my back on a bench, you're going to be here, you're going to go 1, 2, 3, up. So it's going to be nice and slow on the way down, about 1 second at the bottom, and you can either go fast or you can add a tempo with that concentric portion of your movement. Same thing applies to the squat. So here, 1, 2, 3. 3, you should be at your end range or bottom position. 1, 2, up. So it slows it down a little bit, spends more time making that micro trauma in the musculature, so creating those little tears that are going to make it stronger, make the muscle bigger. Okay? The other one we can do, another one of my favorites, box squat. So, set a height for a box or a bench, stack of plates, whatever you have, and you're going to set it so you're just about parallel in the knees and the hips. You're going to squat down, you're going to touch your butt to that bench, and then you're going to come up. So you have to control it down because you're not going to get that spring out of the bottom like a lot of people want to. Okay, you're actually going to have to control it. Kind of takes that stretch reflex out slightly, but it's a good rendition because it keeps it under control and it limits that range of motion, especially if you have a butt wink. Having a box underneath you where you just stop shy of where your pelvis actually starts to twist under is going to be very beneficial for you until you actually get adequate range of motion in your ankles. Okay? Another one, a little bit rarer, but you can do a pin squat. So 2 ways to do a pin squat. You can either start it on the safeties and you do a bottom up, or you start at the top, you lower it down so it rests on the safety bars or the pins, and then you re-brace to drive it up. A lot harder. Obviously, if you want, we will go over it. There's plenty of videos on pin squats, a little bit more special, but they may be a better tool for you if you're more advanced in your training. Okay? You can obviously play around with your feet as well, so doing a kickstand where one foot is slightly behind the other, where you have more emphasis on one side compared to the other, will help as well. We'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the hinge. So for loading, like I said, barbell, kettlebell, dumbbell, backpack, whatever you got, okay? Switch it from front, back, overhead. You can do one side and then the other while you're squatting as well, as long as you switch it up so you're not doing the same thing every single time you're doing the movement, okay? Obviously, there's a lot more on the squats. There's dozens of variations for the squats, but this will give you a good baseline to go through, because if you're not good at the bases, there's no point of building upon a structure that's not solid. Okay? So we want to make sure we're good at these movements before we add anything more complex on. So the next one, we have the hinge. With the hinge, it's anything here where you're pushing those hips back. Primary mover is through the hips. So the big one that we think about when we have the hinge is the deadlift. Deadlift, arguably the king of movements. With the squat, basically which one's better is just dependent on personal preference. Okay? So the deadlift, you can do a normal deadlift, you can do a Romanian deadlift or something similar, but that whole portion of pushing those hips back, loading, and then driving up, the whole movement comes from the hips. Okay, so loading the hamstrings, loading the glutes, keeping that core braced, okay? So with the deadlift especially, you want to keep that core braced as you're hinging. You want to take that big breath at the top and push the hip back, because once you're in this semi-squat position, or a position where you're going to pick up the bar, it's going to be harder to take a breath and harder to expand your stomach to actually get that intra-abdominal pressure, okay? So with that one, as you're lifting up, you want to keep that because we don't want to see any rounding. So rounding in the back is a very common fault, especially if you're having difficulty or it's too heavy. You'll see people round, they'll get it to their knee and they'll just kind of lean back. You want to keep that nice and straight, okay? Next one we have is a little bit more dynamic. So we have a kettlebell swing. So with kettlebell swing, I'll steal this one. So with a kettlebell swing, kind of similar in the fact that all your power is coming from your hips. Hips are the dominant mover in this movement, okay? So with a kettlebell, safe lifting, you're here, you're just gonna push your hips back and come up. So it's just slight hinge forward, pushing your hips back so that kettlebell can just clear your legs and go through, okay? We don't need to go overhead, just coming up is perfectly fine. So we're just pushing the hips back, popping through. So squeeze your butt, think about pushing your hips perfectly forward. Here, snap. Here, snap forward, okay? So getting that glute activation. This is really good for building up tissue tolerance in your low back as well, especially adding to your glutes. So those are actually working so your lower back isn't compensating for that lat of musculature and lat of activation through your glutes. So those are really good. And you can swing anything. You can swing laundry jugs, you can swing a backpack, you can swing a kettlebell, you can do dumbbells as well, whatever you have, as long as it can clear your legs. You can play around with it with loading, you can do a single arm, you can go heavier, you can go lighter with more reps. It's completely up to you and your goal throughout your training, okay? Next one, a little bit different, a little bit more complex. If you're new to the gym, this is probably not a movement you're going to go through first. If you're a little bit more advanced, it may boost you up. So we're going to talk about the good morning. So good mornings. So good morning, typically barbell in the back. You're here. You're going to drive those hips back till you feel that pull in your hamstring. Shoulders are always going to be above your hips, and then you're going to squeeze your glutes and your hamstrings to come back up. Barbell in the back is your typical way of doing these, but you can hold a plate here if you'd like. It's more back extension-esque compared to a good morning, but if you don't have a barbell and you only have a plate, a kettlebell, a dumbbell, a rucksack, a rock, whatever you have, it is a little bit easier to hold in that front position compared to on the back. So, say I have my kettlebell, you can hold it here, or you can go cross arm. It's completely up to you where you're comfortable. I like to invert it, so the bell is actually sitting on top of my hands. You're here, keep that back nice and braced, keep those shoulders back, drive the hips back, feel that pull in your hamstrings and your glutes, and then come back up. So it's not a huge movement. You can get pretty heavy with these. There is some people in the world that can do that movement with 800 pounds with a barbell on their back. So, especially at the higher levels, take elite powerlifters for example, doing good mornings have boosted people from a 700-pound squat to an 800-pound squat, okay? Some people may think, oh, that's only 100 pounds. But when you're in more advanced levels, it's really hard to get greater jumps. So take Olympic lifting, it can take 3 years to put 2 kilos on your total, or on your snatch or your clean and jerk. Okay? So it is very beneficial, really good for your low back as long as you're doing it properly. So if you're not sure that you're doing it correctly, reach out to somebody. Reach out to PSP. Reach out if you have a personal trainer. Okay? Do your research before you try it, because if you don't do it properly, it can lead to injury. Especially if you get down here, you lose that core, and you start to round, then it's most likely coming over the top, or it's going to shoot you forward. Okay? And that's obviously something we don't want. We want you guys to do this as safely as possible to make sure that we limit any injuries. Okay? So that's our hinge. Modifications, you can do your deadlifts from a block, so block pulls. You can do deficits. You can do the deadlift single legged or kickstand like we talked about earlier. That's completely up to you and what you're comfortable with. With the kettlebell swing, you can do it single armed, you can do it with a dumbbell, kettlebell, backpack, whatever you have. And with the good morning, you can do it front loaded or rear loaded. Go light the first few times you do it, or for the first block you do it, just so you get that rhythm of going through. Another movement that would fall into the Hinge is the reverse hyper if you have one of those machines. If you don't worry about it, stick with one of these. But if you do have a reverse hyper in your facility, take advantage for it. Ask about it, do your research, and then try. It's really good for lower backs. It's what helped Larry Bird come back from injury so he wasn't forced to retire. So if it's good enough for Larry Bird, it's good enough for you. Okay? Next one, lunges. These variations are pretty straightforward, so we're going to talk about standards, we're going to talk about modifications, and then once again we're going to talk about loading. So, the normal ones here, we got walking lunge, we got reverse lunges, and we got alternating lunges. All these are the same principles. Yes, you can go lateral as well. These are the primary ones that we're going to talk about through here because we're going to add lateral later on in our step and gait. So, normal lunge, big thing here, you want to make sure your knees are in line with the center toe, okay? So you want to make sure that knee is tracking over the center of your foot. You don't want it too far in because that's going to put a lot of pressure on your MCL. You don't want to do it too far out because you're probably going to lose your balance, and you can wrench your ankle, you can wrench your knee, and you can wrench your hip. Obviously something we don't want, okay? So those are the three big ones. Reverse lunges, you're just stepping back, down. You don't necessarily have to touch your knee to the ground. Just go to the range that you're comfortable with, especially if you have knee pain or anything like that. Don't push it unless you're able to, okay? Alternating lunges, same thing. You're just going to do one leg and then the other instead of just doing one leg at a time. You can do that. Also called split squats. They're called squats. They fall more into a lunge category. So split squat, you're here, front foot balance, back foot. You're just going to drop down, come up, okay? Lunge pattern that we include in our squat pattern, okay? Different modifications for it. You can do front foot elevated, you can do rear foot elevated, you can do a split squat, or you can do an isometric hold where you're just here, you'll come down, and you're just going to hold this position for a period of time, 20 to 30 seconds, or if you want to do upwards of a minute or more, that's completely up to you, but it is dependent on your current goals and your training age, okay? With isometric holds, they are very underutilized. I suggest putting them in your training, especially if you don't have any equipment. They are very beneficial for you. So, with the lunge, we'll go with loading. You can carry a barbell, you can use dumbbells, you can do kettlebells, you can do a sandbag, okay? Anything that we talked about before is applicable to these. So a lot of things to talk about. If you have any three things in your environment, it should be a kettlebell or a sandbag and a pull-up bar, okay? Something along those lines. With those three, you can do pretty much anything, okay? So, with the lunge, you can do, say you're using a kettlebell, you can hold it by your side, you can hold two of them up here, you can hold one low, one high, so you've got to resist flexing side to side. You can do one at a time, so only one held. You can do overhead. There's a lot of different variations that you can do, but like I said, it's completely up to your limits and what you feel comfortable with. Overhead is probably the most difficult. You can do with sandbag, for example, shoulder, shoulder. You can hold it here, completely up to you. Kettlebell, or dumbbell rather, very similar to the kettlebell of where you're holding it. Barbell is a little bit different. So barbell, you're either going to go front rack, on your back like a normal squat, or up overhead. There's not really that many variations for the barbell. Those are the primary three that you should stick to, okay? If you're not, or if you're a little bit more advanced, you can do one side at a time. So have that high rack position or up overhead. Do lunges for a set distance or a set amount of reps, and then switch sides, and then go from there, okay? So those are our lunges. Next, we're going to go up to twist. So, twist, we're going to talk about anti-rotation instead. So resisting, actually twisting. We will talk about a little bit of anti-flexion as we go through. But the big ones here, Pavlov press, the one I use the most. So this can be used banded or with a cable machine. Obviously it's a little bit difficult to demo it now, but like I said, we'll make a later video if you guys are interested. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to have a band square in the body pulling out to the side. Two ways you can do it. Standard Pavlov press is you're here, a little bit of bend, so athletic position. Right here, the band is pulling to the side, so it wants to pull you this way. So you got to resist. You got to squeeze that oblique, keep yourself square, squeeze your glutes, and then you're going to press in a straight line. So out here, it really wants to pull you over as your moment arm gets longer, and you have to resist that. So you're here, out, and then back. Something steady. You can also hold it here, step out to the side, and then step back. It's difficult here. It's more difficult keeping it here, especially with the movement. The tension is going to be a little bit harder. So keep it here, step out, and then step back for a set amount of steps. With the band, it's a little bit harder to do lateral motion because as you go through, the harder or the more the band tension is going to be. Whereas with a cable, you're going to have that constant tension. So it's going to be a little bit different stimulus as you go through and a little bit more torque with the band. But that one's my personal favorite for it. Next one, very simple, very straightforward. You've all probably done it. Side plank. So you can throw this one in with anti-flexion as well, so resisting coming here. But with the side plank, a lot of people, when they fail, they will either roll backwards or roll forwards. So that twisting or that rotation through the hip as you go through, as you fail. Not many people will just drop the hip and then roll over. Most of them will do it in one big movement. So side plank. On your side, you can either do it from your elbow or your hand. Here, big thing here, think about pulling your lat towards your ribs. Keep that nice and braced. Keep yourself nice and straight. You can have your feet stacked, or you can have both feet on the ground to keep it there. Okay? Next one you probably haven't seen, this is one we'll definitely demo on a later date, or you can try to find it online somewhere, is anti-rotation plate pushaways, or ARPA, if you really want to abbreviate it. So anti-rotation plate pushaways. So if you have a back extension or even a GHD will do, preferably one of those back extensions where you have it hooked to your hips and you're a little bit forward. So what you're going to do is you're going to lie on your side, you're going to make it so you're nice and straight, you're going to squeeze that oblique, you're going to have a plate, a kettlebell, or a dumbbell here, and you're going to press. Okay, so you're going to be on an angle or you're going to be fully horizontal. So these are my legs, this is my head, you're going to push it this way. And you got to resist folding. Okay, you can do it too if somebody's holding your feet on a bench, but it's a little bit better to do it in an actual machine where you can have your feet anchored to something. Okay, a lot less risk of injury, especially if the person that's holding your feet isn't very strong or has sweaty hands, or you try to kick because you lose your balance. Chances are you're going to topple over top, head over heels, and that's obviously something we don't want to do. So those are three that are going to keep you started. I personally don't like Russian twist. We do have this rotation to go through, but it's to keep us from getting injured. We don't necessarily need to go here, because think about the contraction time of each movement. You're not really doing much there. So it's much better to do something like this where you're creating more time under tension for that musculature, so more micro trauma, getting more blood flow in there is going to be more beneficial than just kind of repping it out. Okay? Think about doing something tempo. Doing this for bicep curls, sure, you might get a good pump, you might get more reps in, but it's way more difficult to go slow and controlled each way. Same premise with twist or anti-rotation. Okay? So with this, we will talk about anti-flexion as well, so resisting going to the side. Don't do this. Same idea. Doesn't really do much. Farmer's carry is much better. So, or a yoke carry, for example, would work as well. So farmer's carry, kettlebells, you can use trap bar, dumbbells, whatever. by your side, you're resisting folding side to side. You're also resisting extending or flexing through the spine. So you're here and you're just gonna walk nice and controlled, okay? If you wanna make it harder for that anti-flexion, you're gonna hold the kettlebell on one side, keep yourself nice and square, and step. You don't wanna lean over to one side, so overcompensating, so leaning too far to the other side, or not compensating enough and actually folding in. So you wanna choose a lighter weight to go through it, okay? Another one, you can bring it up overhead. You can do that front rack as long as you're getting that squeeze in the oblique and you're resisting twisting over as well as to the side. It's going to be very beneficial for you, okay? Farmer's carries you can do with anything. Dumbbells, kettlebells are traditionally the big ones. You can do a plate squeeze and carry a plate, or you can hold the center of the plate. You can use sandbags as well. You can use a backpack, you can use rocks, whatever you can hold in your hands for a set distance to carry or a set amount of time, you can. If you have access to a yoke, so yoke, think about a movable squat rack, okay? We'll have your standard squat rack with the J cups in front, but it's got this really thick bar that will come across, kind of like a pull-up bar, but it's about yay round, and it will actually sit on your back. You'll pick it up and then you'll walk with it. That one's really good for resisting that flexion extension, but it's also really good for agility because of how much your quadratus lumborum, so in your lower back, recruits. It'll actually help you shift side to side without the yoke on your back, okay? And so those are the big ones for the twist. We will do a quick recap after this if I'm going too fast. Next one is your gait, okay? So gait or step, this is anything that will help you in your walking or running. We'll talk about the step first, and then we'll get into the gait. So the step, anything like a step up or a step down. Step up / down. So think about going up the stairs, think about step aerobics, anything like that. So controlling yourself up. You can leave one foot up there and just do one leg, similar to the lunge, but you're actually stepping, okay? Step down, same idea, just in reverse. You can do step overs if you'd like as well. So we'll talk about the step over next. So you can do that both forward and lateral. So step overs. Just think about stepping up onto a box, stepping down on the other side, okay? Just forward and back over. If you do CrossFit, you've probably done step overs or like burpee box jumps or something similar. That is essentially the premise of this. So you're going up onto a surface, down on the other side, and then repeat, okay? So you're stepping over that object. You can do it with a bench too, stepping over and then just turning around and going back over. As long as you have something, an obstacle or anything like that that's in your way that you can step over, that's essentially what you gotta do, okay? Lateral step overs, think the same thing, but you're going side to side. So think of a lateral step over. If you're loaded, you're gonna come up over whatever you're stepping over and then over, or you can do it on a step or a bench where you just have one leg up and you're actually stepping up and then controlling yourself back down. That is very beneficial towards getting towards a pistol squat. So being able to actually squat on one leg, down and then up, you can do that, you're in a good spot. But anything like a step up or a lateral step up will add going towards that because you're using one side. And it also doesn't allow you to compensate through both sides. So if say one hip is stronger than the other, doing it one side and then the other, so unilaterally, will actually help break down that compensation and get rid of those imbalances and asymmetries throughout the body. So these are our main steps. Next, we're going to talk about our gait. So any type of running drill, jogging, walking, anything like that. So the big ones we're going to talk about, probably done them if you've done track or anything, ABCDs, so just basic running patterns. Those ones are a lot easier just to go and check out instead of me trying to describe them, considering I only have about an 8-foot block here until I'm out of camera. Very simple, just helping you with your running pattern. With running as well, it is better to transition towards a more minimalist shoe. That way you can feel the floor. You actually have a little bit more flexion and use of your ankles. It'll help you throughout, and it's a more natural run. So think about running barefoot, a more minimalist shoe will help you through that. And then on top of that, just running, walking, jogging, anything of the sort. So run, walk, or jog. Just focusing, you don't want that big hip sway. You want to keep yourself nice and square as you go through. That'll definitely help with your gait, stepping as well. So, quick and dirty, going through. Hopefully you guys get a baseline. We will recap each one we talk about here. So, push. We got our vertical push, our overhead press or our push press, our dips, so dip bar, press up, and our Z press, where you're sitting on the floor, pressing above your head. That one is the most complex of each one of those. But if you're going for, say, your one strength, the overhead press and the push press is going to be the heaviest of those movements. Going over to a horizontal press, push-ups, bench press, and floor press. Base level here, push-up, body weight. You can add a backpack or something similar on your back if you want to make it a little bit more difficult. That's up to you. Bench press is going to be the top. It's going to be your heaviest. Some people, if you're better at that top portion of a press, floor press may be better for you. Okay? Pull, vertical pulls, pull-ups, chin-ups, lat pull down, so anything overhead, bringing that elbow back towards the body. You can do it here too, so bringing that elbow back towards the midline. Lat pull down is just a machine version or a cable version, and then a high pull. So remember, bring it up, keep that V in the arms, and if you feel a pinch in your shoulder here, just stop shy so you don't actually feel that pinch. Okay? Until we get adequate range of motion in the shoulder, we don't want to risk the chance of injury. Okay? Going up to the squat. So back squat, front squat, overhead squat, anything there. So back, front, overhead. You can do that with barbell, dumbbell, kettlebell, whichever one you prefer, or whatever's at your disposal. Goblet squat, same idea. So holding it here, you can hold it up here as well if you like, completely dependent on your training age, your ability, and what equipment is available to you. Zercher squats, kind of the top end of that. Obviously, overhead press is going to be the most difficult because a lot of people don't have this range in their shoulder and they don't have the range in their hips and ankles to actually get into that proper position. Excuse me, if you want to do a test to see where you're at, grab a broomstick, get somebody to watch you, and go through that movement. So Zercher squat, holding here, barbell sits across in the pit of the arms, and then you squat from there. You gotta stay up vertical, because if you fold forward, chances are that bar is coming out. Okay, so it keeps you nice and straight throughout the movement. On to hinge. Actually, before we go to hinge, your modifications, your pause squats, going down to the bottom, keeping tension on the musculature, pausing for a few seconds, so a 2, 3, 4 count, upwards of 10 seconds. 10 seconds are really gross, but it's up to you where you prefer, and then explode out of the hole. Okay? Tempo squats, so controlling down, so 1, 2, 3, up. So you can either explode up, or you can go down, pause, and then come back up at the same speed that you're descending with. Box squat, setting a box where when you go down to touch the box, you're just breaking parallel, so knees in line with the hips, and you're going to come up. So it's going to give you that target. Like I said, especially if you have a butt wink or any issues with your ankle, it's going to bring you down so you can set it a little bit higher so you don't actually have that posterior tilt of the pelvis that we're going to risk a lower back injury. Okay? Bench squats, your most advanced of this one. So going down your squat, let it rest on the safeties, takes the pressure off, keep yourself braced, press up, or you can do a bottom-up squat where it's going to start on the safeties. You actually have to get under the bar at your bottom position and then stand up. It's very big in powerlifting and Olympic lifting, depending on where your sticking point is for your main lifts. But if you want to try them out, go ahead. Just please do it in a safe manner. Hinge, so your deadlift, that big deadlift, everybody wants a heavy deadlift. That's your king in this group. Your kettlebell swing. Same premise for both. Push the hips back, load the hamstring, load the glutes, explode through you. So you want all your power, especially in the deadlift, for example, to come from your quads, your hamstrings, and your glutes for that pull. And you want all your power in that kettlebell swing to come from your hips. So you want to drive those hips through to actually come up into a perfectly extended position through the hips and the knees. Okay? Kettlebell swing, you can come up in the ankles too, but preferably you keep that nice base with your heels on the floor. Next one, good morning. That is your most complicated one there. Kettlebell is probably the easiest to learn. Deadlift, there's a lot of modifications, so your deficit, your block pulls, whatever, it does go heavy, so please be careful. Good morning is the most difficult because of where it is loaded on the spine. So it is loaded back here. Like I said, you can't hold a plate across chest or a kettlebell or dumbbell, whatever. Preferably not a front squat. You can do good mornings with a safety bar or a camber bar if you have them. So you're here, pushing the hips back. So it's driving from the hip. Your hips are going to break first. Your knees are just kind of following along. Same idea with the squat. So you're pushing those hips back. Shoulders above hips. We don't want to go all the way down here. We want to keep this nice angle. Load your hamstrings, load your glutes, squeeze the floor with your feet, and then pull yourself back up into position. Okay? Do your research on those. Try them out light before you add any type of significant or even moderate weight to them. Lunging, so walking lunge, reverse lunge, alternating lunge. Okay? Simple bodyweight exercise, always good for you in any rendition. Just make sure your knees stay in line with the center of your foot the whole time, and try not to shift side to side. Try to keep your hips nice and square as you're going through. Modifications for that one: front foot elevated, so up on like an inch to 2 inch box. You can do it a little bit higher if you want, but typically anywhere from that blue and red plate to the yellows will be beneficial for you. Rear elevated lunges, rear foot elevated lunges, or rear foot elevated split squats. So different idea. Foot comes up onto a bench, it can be a little bit higher, and then you're going to drop the knee there. The difference between a regular split squat and then a Bulgarian split squat for rear foot elevated. Regular, you're going to come up, and when your knee travels, it's actually going to go forward over top. If you're doing a Bulgarian split squat, when you go down, your shin angle is going to stay straight. Okay? So it's just a little rendition. Bulgarians are more difficult. Or you can do an isometric hold. So actually just going into this lunge position, stepping back, holding here, and then coming up once your set amount of time is done. Loading, barbell, dumbbell, kettlebell, load one side, you can wear a backpack, whatever you'd like to do. It's completely dependent on what you have available and your comfort zone. Okay? And that's our lunge, our twist. So our pal off press, pulling to the side here. Press out, resist, twisting to the side, and come back. You should feel it activate throughout your obliques on the side. Side planks, traditional. You just want to make sure you keep that nice streamline with your body. You don't want one hip too low. You don't want it too high. You want it nice and straight to get the most out of the movement. And then anti-rotation plate pushaways. Do your research on those. There should be videos on YouTube. I got that from the prehab guys. You can go check them out. With that, that is going to be the most difficult one of it because you are hovering over a surface, so you have that risk of holding down, or you have that risk of rotating forward. With that as well, your anti-flexion exercise, so resisting coming here, will be your firmest carries, whether you hold 2 or 1, or you can do a yoke carry. Okay? After that, we talked about our gait. So your step up, your step down, or your step overs. Some sort of step over or step up, keeping those hips nice and square throughout, getting those glutes activated as you go through. And then with our gait, we have our ABCD drills. Anything you do in track will be beneficial. Even just getting better at your running pattern, your walking pattern, or your jogging pattern will be beneficial. Transitioning to a more minimalist shoe will help as well as we get that natural foot path to go through. For example, if you have custom orthotics, that's kind of just pulling a band-aid over a bullet wound. You actually want to get to that root cause of that injury to actually help you through it. Okay? So, this is a brief overlook. Like I said, there is obviously more movements that you can do, but this should give you a nice base to build upon. So, in closing regards, if you do want a full video where we go through and demo each one, we can even break it up into separate videos where we just tackle the push, the pull, the squat, the hinge, the lunge, the twist, and the steps/gait. Please leave a comment below or reach